Hi, I'm Jon.
I'm Lillian.
We're urban stargazers. And November marks the end of daylight savings time, where we roll the clocks back 1 hour because we think we can control when the sun rises and sets. Isn't that silly?
That's silly.
Very silly. The fact of the matter is that the sun rises and sets and the planets rise and set the same every day, all year long. But we do get a little extra sleep, so that's kind of nice. The other thing really nice about November is we get over 15 hours of good dark skies.
That's great.
That really is great, even though it's kind of cold.
Bah.
But with 15 hours of dark, there is absolutely no excuse to not find time to come out and check out the heavens. It's going to be a great month. One of the questions that I get asked a lot on our Facebook group is, what makes a good telescope, or what is a good starter scope? What's a good beginning telescope? And there's a lot of information that's been written about what makes a good starter scope and what makes a good beginning telescope, and I'm not going to get into that. People actually have pretty heated debates over which scope to buy. What I will tell you is the best telescope is the telescope that you use to look at stars. And the worst telescope, Lillian,
Is one that sits in your garage collecting dust and gets, a year later, gets sold in the garage sale.
that's right. If your telescope is sitting in your garage and you're going to sell it at the garage sale later, that's a bad starting telescope. The other thing I want to talk a little bit about is, what is a telescope and why do we use it for astronomy? Well, a lot of people think of the telescope as sort of like the pirate movies. It makes an object far away look really close up. But in astronomy, a telescope has another important feature. It collects a lot of light. If you think about your eye as sort of like this cup, and light is sort of like a rainstorm. If I were to hold this cup out in a rainstorm, it would take a long time for it to fill up with water. But if I were to take a really big funnel and direct all that rain into this cup, it would fill up really quickly. And a telescope is a bit like a giant light funnel. And that collection of light allows us to see objects that are fainter and more distant than our eyes normally would. Now, with that said, your eyes are your best observing tool. The ancients didn't need telescopes, or, well, they didn't use telescopes. They just went out in the night sky and looked at what things there were to see. They made notes and looked at what was different night after night. One of the things that's really cool that they noticed is that some objects in the sky seemed to move around from night to night, whereas the stars didn't. The objects that moved around from night to night, they called them wandering stars. What they were really seeing were the planets that are really bright in our night sky. Planets like Mars, like Jupiter, Saturn, and Venus. And in November, we get a cool month because we get to see all 4 of those wandering stars in one night, all month long. Starting at dusk, Mars rises up in the east. Now, Mars was at its very brightest on October 13th, but it is a little dimmer, but still very, very bright. It's going to be the brightest star-like object you see in the east after dusk. And it's got a reddish-orange hue to it, almost the color of a candle. Jupiter and Saturn, they're still off in the south. They're lower in the horizon right now. And they're going to be setting a couple hours after dusk. Jupiter will set first, Saturn right after. But if you go out, once it starts getting dark and you look to the south, you're going to see 2 bright objects. That's Jupiter and Saturn. In the meantime, if you get up really early, around 5 in the morning, looking east-northeast, you're going to see the morning star. That's Venus, the planet Venus. It's going to be the brightest thing in the sky that's not the moon. Those are planets that you can see with your naked eye. You don't need a telescope. You can just go out and observe them. Another really amazing thing to see in the night sky in November, and all winter long, happens to be my favorite thing in the night sky, no matter what. It is
The Andromeda Galaxy.
when you look out in the night sky, almost all the stars you see come from our galaxy, the Milky Way. But if you look way up high in the November sky, you're going to see a group of stars that form a W. That's the constellation of Cassiopeia. And if you follow the point of that W down in an arc, only a little ways, you're going to see kind of an oval smudge. And that is the Andromeda Galaxy. It is 1 trillion stars located 2.5 million light years from the planet Earth.
What in the world?
No, it's out of this world, Lillian.
What in the world?
The Andromeda Galaxy is also moving straight towards the Milky Way at a rate of 110 kilometers every second. You think about that trillion stars. That's a trillion suns. Those are planets, countless numbers of planets. There are moons around those planets. There's asteroids floating around there, comets going by these objects that are just amazing. Every time I look at the Andromeda Galaxy, my mind just wonders at the just sheer immensity of the universe. And you don't need a telescope or a pair of binoculars to see it. You just gotta look up at the right place anytime this winter. And it's gonna be especially good late at night in November. November's going to close with a very, very cool event. On November 30th, there is what's called a Penumbral Lunar Eclipse. Now, I say it's on November 30th, but you're actually going to have to stay up late at night on November 29th. If you wake up and it's November 30th, you've already missed it. So, you're staying up late at night at November 29th, and the clock rolls past midnight. It's now November 30th. And at 12:30-ish in the morning, you're going to see part of the shadow of the Earth start moving across the moon. That shadow is called the penumbra. By about 2:42, the moon is going to be at its most dim, as the shadow of the Earth mostly shades the moon. And then by about 5 a.m., it's all over. Now, what is a penumbral lunar eclipse? The Earth casts a shadow, and there are two parts to the shadow. One is called the penumbra, where basically we cast a light shadow, a grayish shadow. The other part is called the umbra, and that is where the Earth completely blocks the sun. So the penumbra is when the Earth partially blocks the sun. The umbra is when the Earth totally blocks the sun. On November 30th, or rather, on the night of November 29th, the penumbra, the partial shadow of the Earth, is going to go falling across the moon. It's going to make the moon go from really, really bright to dimmer and dimmer and dimmer, and then bright again. It's a really cool thing to see at night. It's like we have the moon on a dimmer switch, and it's worth checking out to close out a great month for observing the sky. Well, that's it for me, Lillian. What do we got to do?
Keep
looking up.